Well, and without any further delay, I would like to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Ann Francke, Chief Executive of Chartered Management Institute, the professional body for managers and leaders. She started her career at Procter Gamble and has held senior executive positions at Mars, Boots, Yale, and BSI. Ann is a regular columnist for The Times on management and leadership. In 2020, she was awarded an OBE, Order of British Empire, for services to workplace equality. She authored Create a Gender Balanced Workplace and the Financial Times Guide to Management. Well, let's welcome Ann to the stage. Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here, and boy, have you gotten lucky with the weather. Yeah, and I think it's going to last all weekend, so that's wonderful. We don't often get that in London. So I think this is a really timely topic, and I think that actually the actions of the last couple of days have made it even timelier. But before we get into all of that, I'll just tell you a little bit about CMI. This is sort of CMI at a glance. As was said, we're the professional chartered body for management and leadership. Chartered bodies are a UK thing. There are many of them. And the charter it's a royal charter awarded, in our case, by the Queen and ratified by the Privy Council, which goes back to the 1100s. We set standards for best practices in management and leadership, and these standards are used by over 220,000 learners and members in 170 countries. Much of that is in the UK, but increasingly we are going and getting more global. We also work with a community of just under, well, it's probably about 1,000 partners. These are universities, private training providers, employers. So we actually work with others to deliver our qualifications and our assessments. And we are the only ones that can award Chartered Manager, which is a professional qualification for leaders and managers. Our mission and vision are stated there. I like to say we turn accidental managers into capable, conscious, and inclusive leaders. That's really why we exist. And of course, you can visit our website. Our values all begin with P. We are progressive, we are practical, we are professional, and we are passionate. So that's just a little bit about CMI. We also believe that great managers and leaders make impact, and we measure the impact of chartered managers. And I'm going to share some impact that we just did this year. It was independent research from Oxford Economics. There are just under 30,000 chartered managers. This is the chartered manager population in the UK. They deliver over £66,000 to the UK economy. They deliver over, or just under, £60,000 of value to their organizations every year for 5 years. They do make an impact. That's actually also excluding the impact they have for their teams. They are better managing and leading their teams. They are definitely more inclusive, and the impact on them. So about 90+% of chartered managers improve two of the fundamental aspects of good management and leadership: their self-confidence and their self-awareness. So it really does matter, and this is coming now to my theme, how good a leader or manager you are, and no matter what you do in your careers, you will either be managed or led, or you will be doing managing and leading. So this is absolutely relevant for everybody. So what are we going to get on to now? Well, we are living in an incredibly uncertain age. Just the events over the last 24 hours have completely upended everything. The global order. There's a lot of tribalism going on right now in the world, I think we can say, in the political leadership, which obviously is not by nature inclusive. So how do we cope with this? Well, I'm going to introduce you to a slogan. It's eat your own dog food. You may say that's a really bizarre slogan. I'll come on to how that came about. There's a little story behind it. And I'll explain what it means. And then at the end and throughout, I really want you all to be aware that you have choices. There is a spectrum of working cultures. They range from very inclusive to very not inclusive. And you all have a choice as to the culture you choose to spend your professional and working lives in, and I would encourage you all to think quite a bit about that. There will, of course, be times for Q&A, so please feel free to ask me whatever you'd like. Now, why is the world uncertain? Well, I said the last 24 hours have upended the global order. That's obviously true. These slides were not done in the last 24 hours, and there's a lot more uncertainty that was around even before that. So, for example, AI. About half of managers and leaders are very unsure about how AI is going to impact their organizations. How can they use it responsibly? You know, should they use it? You guys in universities and colleges, you know, should you use AI on your assignments? What is your institution's attitude toward that? It affects everybody. There's a lot of uncertainty there, and you can read about that every day. As you may know, last year was the warmest year on record. It rose by 1.5 degrees C. That's actually faster than we thought, and you know, that's not going away. That creates huge uncertainty as well around climate change and sustainability. And then, well before we had the latest tribal move by very many men that think and act very much like each other, we had Mark Zuckerberg, there he is up there saying, we need more masculine energy. That's again pretty tribal and not very inclusive. So there is a lot going on in the world that we are up against and that we have to deal with. So how do you deal with that? Well, this is something that I'm sure affects all of you. And at this point, if you are a brave soul, I would ask you, what uncertainties are you dealing with in your lives, and how is it impacting you? Because it does impact all of us. And maybe you have a story. I've had students tell me some pretty touching stories. They can be big, they can be small, but does anybody have an example of how uncertainty is affecting them now that they would be willing to share?
I'll share one with you.
Great.
Currently, I'm employed in Los Angeles, California, and we have quite a bit of uncertainty around whether our young students, up into the age of 18, might be deported back to Mexico, and could possibly be taken from their schools or their homes. And we have very unsure policies around such things.
And isn't it scary, I think is a word you could use. Is that how, or how does that make you feel, that uncertainty?
Quite scary.
Yeah. And so, and that's a lot of what uncertainty does. It makes us feel scared, it makes us feel unsure, it makes us feel quite challenged in ways because maybe we can't control what's going on and we feel that we can't control. Any other stories? Yes, here and then here.
I think the general consensus around people my age, my generation, is not exactly what happens in the workplace, but about finding work in general. I think the consensus is that a lot of people are having difficulty even finding work to begin with, and that really increases our uncertainty. You know, like if there's a lot of people my age that are unemployed or are not able to find jobs that are paying more than minimum wage, how we're going to be able to find certainty even now, but especially later in life when we're trying to afford, you know, places to live and a future for ourselves. And I think that's very difficult to manage just in general, because if you can't find work, or if you're applying to all of these places and you can't find anything that will sustain you, it's very uncertain for a lot of people, and very scary, honestly.
Yes, I think that's a great point. And there is underemployment, so people get great college degrees and then, yeah, you end up maybe working for minimum wage somewhere. That is a very real problem. I think that the number of unemployed people not in employment or education in the UK is the highest it's been now since the mid-'80s. So it is a global issue. And you mentioned that, your generation, the young generation, faces perhaps the prospect of not being wealthier than their parents, and that's very unusual as well. That's a new dynamic. So again, that's uncertainty, something that maybe makes you feel scared, makes you question choices, makes you less confident. And you had something.
Yeah, I think something that you also mentioned before, like for example, the effects of AI on our workplaces. Will my job be the same in 5 years' time? Mm-hmm. What will be my responsibilities? What AI will do it? So it definitely concerns me, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room. And another thing as well, like the immigration policies of various countries, both UK and other countries, will we be having open borders? Are they going to be closing? How it will be affecting them? Study abroad experience or any general education, higher education experience for international students. Yeah, just a few things.
Absolutely, and in this country, you may know they've changed the visa rules. That has made it incredibly difficult, and people don't know. And just like the woman over there said, she's really worried about her students. Well, international students in the UK are also worried about their right to stay. So again, there is a lot of uncertainty, and it's difficult to manage. It makes us feel insecure. It makes us doubt perhaps ourselves. It makes us a little less confident. So what are we going to do about all of that? And my suggestion is eat your own dog food. That will help you. Now, why will that help you? And where does this phrase come from? Well, I was responsible for pet food at Mars in my executive career. And believe it or not, at Mars, you eat your own dog food. I went to a factory in Germany, and I was given a tour. And at the end of the tour, the factory manager said, right, now it's time to do quality control. I said, okay, and we went to a little room off the side of the factory, and he got a white porcelain dish, and he grabbed a can of dog food off the line, and he got a hammer, and he slammed the hammer into the can of dog food, and it went into the white dish, and he stuck his finger in and went, B. And I thought, oh. And he said, now you. And I thought, what do I do in this situation? Well, I did not eat the dog food because I had a dog and a cat, and I explained very politely, and even in German, that it was my dog and cat that were eating the dog food, not me, and that I was very happy with that, and they found it very good. And really, in this sense, eat your own dog food means be true to your values. And in that situation, as awkward as it was, I was true to my values. I did not care to eat the dog food, and I did not. And I lived to tell the tale. So that's a little example. I mean, he was not my boss. I was an executive, actually. That didn't matter. He was asking me to do something that wasn't in my value set, and I just didn't do it. And I ate my own dog food, which was to politely decline. And I think that that's a really important thing that you do have to be aware of. You do have to know your values, you do have to know your boundaries, and you do have to feel comfortable acting in line with all of those. So eat your own dog food, though, also stands for something. And I'm now going to explain what, for me, it stands for. And this is all based on research that my institute, the Chartered Management Institute, does. But it is also based on a lot of other research, and I'll refer to some of that other research. The research from CMI, there's a couple of reports there. Walking the Walk, all about inclusive leadership and taking responsibility, why UK PLC needs better managers. All our research and thought leadership is available for free on our website. Please do check it out. You can read a lot more about what I'm about to share. So the E stands for empathy and excellence. Why does that matter? Well, the professor that kicked us off talked about empathy. It's a very important attribute. A supportive manager is actually the most important factor of satisfaction in any workplace. It's more important even than the entire workplace culture or any ED&I or inclusivity initiatives in and of themselves. Supportive managers are empathetic. They actually are incredibly inclusive. They make people feel supported. They make people feel able to be themselves. They bring out the best in the people that they lead and manage. Now, how can you attain that level of empathy and inclusivity? You can be trained, and we'll come on to the importance of that in a moment. If you are trained in leadership and management, which is something we at CMI advocate very strongly, you are much more likely to know how to role model these inclusive behaviors. We say great managers and leaders are made, not born. And that is contradictory to a lot of other older-fashioned belief sets. And did you know that your line manager at work has the greatest single impact on your own well-being at work, and the second greatest impact on your own well-being outside of work? It's an incredibly important relationship. And of all of the relationships, it correlates most closely with how engaged you feel. Now, many of you are students, maybe some are working for universities. How many of you actually manage people? Raise your hands. Okay? And how many of you are managed by people? Okay? So now think about when you've had a bad manager. Have you had a bad manager? Raise your hand. Okay, how did that make you feel? Not very good, probably, right? Now think about when you had a good manager. Who's had a good manager? And how did that make you feel? Probably a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident. So it's something that we all experience and we can all relate to, and it really does make a difference. So empathy is a cornerstone of good management and leadership. It is our ability to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. It is our ability not to project our own thoughts and feelings onto other people, but actually actively listen to what their thoughts and feelings are. Empathy is curiosity about how others are thinking and feeling. Empathy is listening, and empathy matters. Now, excellence also matters, and here's where accidental managers as a statistic come into their own. In this country, we have 8 million managers. Our research shows that 82% of those 8 million managers, when they get promoted into managerial positions, are what we call accidental managers. What does that mean? It means they might be fabulous finance people, or marvelous marketers, or supreme social media czars, whatever their functional expertise is. But they've never been trained how to lead or manage themselves, or teams, or resources. And yet one day, because they're so functionally good, somebody taps them on the shoulder and says, "Congratulations, you're promoted. You're now running the department, and you're responsible for the team." And they get no training. Now, is it any wonder that they kind of think, "Gee, this is new. What do I do? I'm not sure." It's a very, very common problem. And it has consequences, because untrained managers are less likely to be naturally good at managing and leading others. And that has consequences. And we know that if you are working for a bad manager, 1 in every 2 of you has told us you're going to leave your job in the next year. And who could blame you? Because you're just not feeling valued. You're not feeling included. You're not feeling supported. So bad managers that maybe aren't trained, and it may be unintentional, not all of them are bad people, they're just bad managers, are responsible for people leaving their jobs. And it is the most common reason why people leave their jobs. Now, good managers, on the other hand, do the exact opposite, and our research shows this. If you have a good manager, in addition to thinking about how it made you feel when you had a good manager, they get better results. They are much better at role modeling inclusive behavior. It's the single biggest thing you can do to be an inclusive manager is to get trained on how to manage and lead yourself and others. And when you get better results, you have higher engagement, you attract better talent, you have a better work environment, a positive work environment, an inclusive work environment, and little wonder that you do a better job of meeting your business objectives. We just released a report today, in fact, that compared the FTSE 350, that's like the S&P 500, the British Virgin. We looked at the 10 companies that had closed their gender pay gaps more than anybody else and had more women on their boards and more women on their excos than anybody else. And we did a little analysis, and guess what? They were all growing. Most of them were growing double digit. Now, that isn't causation, but if we ask the companies, we did ask the companies, why do you think you're growing? And they all said, it's our culture, it's the inclusivity, it's making everybody feel welcome, it's getting us better talent. This stuff really does work. And it's very important that we recognize that it is also a business imperative, not just the right thing to do. So what's the A stand for? Well, the A stands for two things: agility and adaptability. So agility is working at pace and pivoting in the face of change. Today's world is dramatically different than yesterday's for so many people. So what are they going to do? Well, they can't just sit there and carry on. They'll go, a lot of them, bust, right? Or, you know, they won't be sustainable. They won't be able to provide goods and services. They have to change. What are they going to do? When you have the pandemic, what are we going to do? We have to change, we have to pivot. When we have these extreme acts of uncertainty, or when we have rapid changes like AI, we do have to change. We have to ask, what can we do to adapt to this situation? And good managers do that. It's that old Einstein thing that, you know, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And yet it's really surprising how many organizations pretend that nothing's changed, it's all fine, we'll just carry on as per usual. Don't do that. And don't be afraid to acknowledge the change. Don't sweep it under the rug. Talk about it. Because by talking about it, you'll figure out how other people are feeling about it. They're probably feeling quite similar to you, maybe a little lost. In talking about the change, in talking about what we can do to be agile and embrace that change, we will come up with better solutions. And good managers and leaders don't sweep that under the rug, don't pretend it's not happening. They face into it and have conversations. Good managers are also highly adaptable. But let me just expand a little bit on the agility point. Because again, I go back to this point about trained managers. Trained managers, not surprisingly, are much better, statistically significantly better. This is our research, Walking the Walk, on leading change initiatives. So 10 percentage points higher. They're much better at embracing AI and technology. Again, that's significant. And they can adapt better to changing priorities. So again, absolutely, being a good manager and leader means you are agile and you're able to cope better with change. Now, what is the adaptability point about? Well, for me, in this context, adaptability is allowing people to build their work around their lives. It's giving them some ownership of how they structure their working days, giving them some flexibility. We regularly do studies about what managers and leaders want. We've done, I think, 12 this last year. And it really doesn't matter whether you're old or young, what gender or sexuality you have, whether you are a man or a woman. The highest value that our managers had was around flexibility. They really welcome the ability to work flexibly. There's been a global study on this by a Stanford professor called Nicholas Bloom. He found on average it was about the equivalent to a 5% pay rise. Flexibility, by the way, is not working all remotely. It isn't. That's actually not good for mental health or productivity. We need social interaction. Flexibility is that hybrid working environment where you come into the office, see your colleagues on some days, and you might work from home on other days. You might work from home in the morning because you have to take a child to school or look after a sick parent or look after a sick child. And you might go into the office in the afternoon for a series of meetings or visit clients. It's about structuring your working life around your life. That is the most valued benefit. And it's especially important if you have caring responsibilities. This isn't just mothers, it's also fathers. But there are studies that show that almost half, about 40% of mothers said if they didn't have that flexibility, they would actually need to leave the workplace. There are also employers now that fall along the spectrum on this. So again, you will have some employers that say, I want you in the office 8 in the morning, 8 in the evening, 5 days a week. Why? Because that's the way they did it. They are being the opposite of inclusive. They are projecting their values the way they did it onto you. It's their right. It's your choice whether or not you want to work for them. Most enlightened employers will say, yep, it's okay. You can have some flexibility. My own story about flexible working started years ago when I was a middle manager at Procter Gamble. I was going through a very tough time personally. It was a divorce. I had a young child. And I went to my general manager, and he had a meeting every day at 9 o'clock. And I said, look, I need to take my child to school. She was 5 at the time. She was 5 years old. And it was a traumatic time for her. And I said, I have to take her to school every day. I walked her to school. And it meant that I could not make his 9 o'clock meeting. I would get there at 9:30 because the school didn't start until 8:45, and then I had to get to work. So he looked at me and he said, that's all right, no problem. Come after you take her to school. And that was just such a huge relief for me. So first couple of meetings, of course, I walked in late. Everybody was already sat around the table. This was, the 90s, the mid-90s. I was red in the face. But guess what? I got over it. And so did my colleagues. And after a while, everybody just got used to it. And it was absolutely fine. So I thought, well, that is such a relief for me. I'm so grateful. And I was managing a team of about 12. And they were young people. I was in my mid-30s. They were in their late 20s. And I thought, well, if he's letting me do that, I'll let them do that. I'll pay it forward. Now, they weren't going through a divorce. Many of them weren't even married, but they had outside interests. One of them liked to play netball. So she came in early and left early to play netball. I didn't care. Another one liked to go clubbing. So he came in late and stayed late. I didn't care. And I just kind of let them fit their work around their lives. This was the mid-90s. And one day I got a call from the global HR people, the head of HR globally in Cincinnati, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? And she said, well, not only do you have a very gender-balanced team, but you also have the best results of any skincare unit. I was running Oil of Olay at that time. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm letting my folks fit their work around their lives and evaluating them on their outcomes and their objectives and not on their face time. And ever since then, I've been a huge proponent of flexible working, and I just think it is something that we can all do, and it's something that we can all ask for, and it makes a huge difference. So that's my ultimate definition of adaptability. And that is also the A in Eat Your Own Dog Food. Now, what about the T? T stands for two things: transparency and teams. Transparency is authentic communication, which enables your colleagues to understand what your thoughts are, enables you to understand what their thoughts are, and it's about being truthful about what's going on and sharing maybe not all information, because sometimes, yes, sharing all information might raise more questions than it answers, but as much as you possibly can. At CMI, we give everybody at CMI the exact same information that we give our board. We do not do 2 decks, one for the board, one for the employees. We're unusual in that. I am a great believer in transparency. Why? Because it inspires trust. Teams are also a very important aspect of being inclusive and of being a good manager. Teams benefit from diversity of thought and the innovation that diversity brings. Let's take a look at each in a little bit more detail. So some of the things that we've uncovered at CMI about transparency are when it comes to inclusion, all kinds of inclusion, age inclusion, sexuality, ethnicity, gender, disability, there is what we call a say-do gap. This is the opposite of transparency. What do I mean by say-do gap? When you ask organizations, HR leaders, as we did, how inclusive is your organization when it comes to X, age, disability, gender? We get 80 to 90% saying, oh, very inclusive. And actually, 3 out of 4 HR leaders believe that they're being very transparent and inclusive. And then when we ask the same group, well, could you name one initiative that you are personally aware of that drives results in the area of this inclusion, ethnicity, sexuality, age, whatever it is, and that 80 to 90% drops to somewhere between 5% and 40%. We call that the say-do gap. You're saying you're inclusive, but you're not doing it. And that is, unfortunately, a large number of organizations today. And a lot of the organizations that are backpedaling on their inclusion initiatives very readily are doing that because, you know, it was just probably a bunch of sloganeering in the first place. It was a lot of saying and very little doing. Whereas the organizations that are really inclusive are actually saying, you know what, this matters to us, we get better results, and we're sticking by our inclusive initiatives. Now, there's a reason for them to do this, because when you have transparent cultures where people feel trusted, again, you get 3 times the job satisfaction. So I always, find it quite stunning when leaders say, well, I'm not doing that stuff because it doesn't work. I mean, of course it works. It gets better business results. So why wouldn't you do this? This is the conundrum that I am often confronted with. And, on that report that we did today, Filling the Gap, released today, I was speaking about it on the radio. And I was saying to the presenter, of course the companies are doing this, not because it's morally the right thing to do. Yes, it's the morally right thing to do, but they're growing. They're growing faster than their peers. And they're very proud of their inclusive cultures and their ability to attract a very wide pool of talent. So why wouldn't they do it? It's a business advantage. So it's very important that you remember that. And if you want to drive trust, what's the #1 thing you can do? And this is also in our research. Share your thinking. People are not mind readers. And that also is both ways. If you're working for somebody and that someone is making you uncomfortable, making you feel doubting about yourself, making you unsure, or making you frustrated, they're not a mind reader. You have to tell them. You can tell them in a nice way and appropriately. And similarly, if you're a leader and you're facing tough times, don't hide it under the carpet. People aren't dumb. People know what's going on. People will see that you might be struggling, that the company might be struggling, that they may face headwinds, and it is much better if you face into those together. At CMI, universities, we work with a lot of them, they're struggling, so we had to save some costs because they were struggling with their costs. So we shared that with our workforce. They came up with brilliant ideas for cost savings because we included them in the conversation and were transparent about the need to save costs. And in doing so, they helped, because of course we then said, these are all great ideas, let's do them. And we saved jobs. And we told them, hey guys, your ideas on cost savings added up to that particular initiative that you suggested helped us save 10 jobs. And that's great, right? So that's about transparency. It's about sharing information. Now, on Teams, and this is all about filling the gap. I don't have a picture of it. It's released today. Again, it's free on our website. Of course, there's research on this. There is McKinsey's research showing that gender diverse teams are about 21% more likely to experience above average profitability. That rises to 35% if it's ethnically diverse teams. Our report released today, the top 10 companies in the FTSE 350 that have done the most to close their gender pay gaps, put more women on their executive teams, and more women on their boards, are growing double digit. And again, when you ask them, they credit a lot of that success down to inclusivity. And they say that that inclusivity boosts innovation. And there's another study from BCG that says the same thing. And we also know, and the professor that kicked this off said it, and it's true, there's a lot of research, when you have diverse teams, you make better decisions. And this is cultural diversity, age diversity, gender diversity, sexuality, ethnicity, lived experience, religion. It all matters because when we confront thoughts that are different from our own, and we do that in an inclusive manner, and we listen, we make better decisions. And actually, one of my favorite studies on this was about juries. Juries that have diverse individuals, when somebody from a different background reacts to the evidence differently, the juries reach better decisions because they actually pay more attention to the evidence because somebody else is challenging their values and making them think about it a little differently. And that's what diversity and inclusivity does when we listen to people who have different experiences. It makes us think about our own views and maybe think, well, maybe actually I could shift that a little bit or look at that a little bit differently, or at least understand where that person is coming from better. And it's very important when you're leading teams that you do that. That means if somebody's not saying anything, you actively say, hey, what do you think? That means you don't do what the chairman of one FTSE 100 company did. He had 2 women on his board. He was very proud of himself. And whenever they were he was asking questions, he went all around the table. He asked all the men first, and then he asked the women last. And then he complained, oh, those women, they never say anything new. Well, yeah, he was asking them last every time. You know, that's not inclusive behavior. So it's about asking the people that aren't maybe the loudest, but might be more thoughtful and listening to what they say. So that's the Eat Your Own Dog Food slogan. I think it is about being true to your values rather than literally eating the dog food, even though they did that at Mars. And I know there is a very high-end dog food brand that is actually advertising saying, tested by humans, made for dogs. So, you know, I guess there are other people eating the dog food. The reason Mars did that, by the way, is because they were the first company to make human quality pet food. And so the reason they were eating it is to say, hey, this is so high quality that, of course, humans could eat it. And actually, another little anecdote, little known, Forrest Mars, the one that founded Mars, he lived in the UK, and he lived in a place called Englewood Green. It's a very pretty place by a very pretty lake. And he was having a cocktail reception. I don't know if it was for the neighbors or the employees. And Mrs. Forrest Mars was in the kitchen in the back. And there she was, spreading chappy dog food on the crackers and then taking them round and serving it to her guests. And they were none the wiser. They thought it was delicious. So that has a lot of heritage. But in my version, eating your own dog food means being true to your own values, thinking about what they are. That doesn't mean that you don't explore what other people's are and have respectful discussions about what they are, but it's about being true to your own values. And in your own careers, this is increasingly important. And I know that there are tough times for finding many jobs, but what I would say is that you have more choice of your workplace cultures than ever before. So what we have seen since the pandemic is that what that did is it finally put paid to a lot of myths about working culture that were very last century. Things like you have to go to an office every day to do good work. Things like you have to sit in endless meetings face to face to make decisions. Things like the people that come in the office the earliest and leave last are the most productive. It actually upended all of that. Things like you can't talk about your children or your pets. One CEO said to me, actually, I used to come into the office every morning and say, hi, how are you, and never mean it. And in the pandemic, I actually, when I was on the video screens with people, I would say, hi, how are you? And for the first time, I would mean it. And I asked them how they really were. And they told me. And I saw their kids and their pets and heard their washing machine in the background. And it humanized the workplace in many, many, many ways. Because it made it less about where you were working and more about how you were working. And so as a result, post-pandemic, many organizations are choosing where they are sitting on that cultural spectrum. And it is up to you guys to really interrogate what that workplace culture is and does it fit with your values. And I would really encourage you all to do that. And there is another reason why doing that is important and why this slogan about eating your own dog food and being adaptable and agile is also very important. Your career will be very long. That is actually one of the consequences. It's a consequence of the fact that you're also healthy and go to the gym more than any other generation. It's also a consequence of advances in medicine and the way that we understand the things that we understand about longevity. And it is also a consequence of economic necessity. Your careers will be very long. They will also not be linear. They will be, as one CMI companion and author says, squiggly. She actually wrote a book called Squiggly Careers. It's a very good book. Your careers will have many ups and downs and twists and turns. I know, mine definitely did. I used to work for big global companies like Mars and P&G, and then I worked for FTSE 100 companies, and now I run a professional body for management and leadership. I've been on so many career journeys. I've been fired. I've been made redundant. I've lost my confidence. I've had to rebuild. I've had to pivot. This will happen to you. It's about being resilient in the face of some of that. So remember that your careers are not linear, and whatever challenge it is you're facing, this too will pass if you remain true to your values. And that's something that I'm very proud I did. I've also quit jobs because they were not true to my values. And I felt I was being disrespected or bullied. So I left. And, you know, I'm still here. So you have that choice. So do learn, do adapt, but don't sacrifice your core values. Be very choiceful about when and how and for whom you work, and be very mindful as well about how you are working with others. Because all of this stuff, I've said trained managers do it better, and they do, and we have the evidence of that. But all of this stuff is that these are things that you can start to practice now. Also as students, because you're working in a lot of teams, you're doing a lot of collaborations, you have a lot of projects, and how you interact with each other is as important for preparing for your working life as it is once you go out into the real world and get your first jobs. And you know what? The other good thing about your generation is when I was going out into the workplace, if you changed jobs a lot, people were very suspicious. What's that on your CV? 2, 3 jobs in 5 years? Whew, what's gone on there? Now, it's very normal. And it doesn't matter. I mean, of course, you have to be able to have said what you've accomplished and why you left. That's important that you can explain that. But you should all know that it is absolutely normal for people to change jobs much more rapidly than they used to. And that's a fact of, you know, the jobs for life thing isn't true anymore, and you all know that. And so you're going to do even more pivoting, and your careers are going to be even more squiggly. So please do eat your own dog food. Thank you. And I think it's now questions.
Yes, so if you'd like to ask a question, we've got 2 microphones going around the room, and we'll bring you a microphone and you can speak, or you can type your question into our Slido, so slido.com, SGLC 2025, and I will be reading some of the questions from Slido. So we'll go ahead and start with one of the questions that was entered from Slido before we move to a question in the room. This question is from Brad Miller, and the question is, there are many 18-year-olds here. What practical advice would you give to your 18-year-old self regarding your career that you learned later on?
So don't be afraid to fail. 97% of people will fail at work, and the other 3% are lying. That's my biggest piece of advice, right? Because we can get all caught up in our heads. And when we get all caught up in our heads and we get afraid to fail, we start to stew. Don't stew. That's the other piece of advice. And if you're going to do, you're going to fail. So please don't be afraid to fail, just learn from it.
Hi, thank you. Okay, I'm Destiny from New York, and my question is, can you talk a bit about knowing when to lead and when to follow? I think a lot of us women have struggled with imposter syndrome, which is, I feel like a buzzword, but you know, sometimes it's easy for us to feel like we are not necessarily capable enough to lead, but I also feel like I do feel like I'm capable enough to lead at times. I just don't know when is my time to lead. So can you talk about when you should lead versus when you should follow?
Sure. Well, we at CMI believe very strongly that you must both lead and manage at every level. So the first thing to recognize is exactly as you said, there are times when you will lead, and maybe there will times where you will take a step back and manage. But at every single level, you need to know how to do both. And this myth that somehow the leaders are all the visionaries at the top and the followers is everybody else is exactly that. It is a myth. So when should you lead? Well, I think it depends on the situation. I mean, firstly, if you are doing a project team and you feel like it's an area that you feel comfortable with and it plays to your strengths, you might say, hey, you know what? I feel comfortable playing a leading role in that. So I'd like to take a crack at leading this team on this project. Because the fact is, we all lead better when we use our strengths. So say you are a great writer, and the project is about writing. You might say, I feel comfortable leading that because that's my wheelhouse. I'll put myself forward. Say you're terrible at maths, and the project is to do a lot of maths and Excel spreadsheets. In that situation, you would not be advised to lead because it's not your strength. You would be more advised to follow and pick somebody to lead that is more comfortable. So my advice is really lead from and with your strengths. And if you're not strong in a certain area, then maybe you want to take a step back and learn from somebody else who is. And we all have strengths, so know what they are and play to them. And surround yourself with people whose strengths are different from your own. You will get better results that way. So please don't have teams of all math whizzes or all great writers because, you know, it'll be a lot less effective. But that would be my tip. Play to your strengths. You'll feel more confident. You don't have to know all the answers as a leader. You do not have to be perfect. You can say, I don't know. You can make mistakes as a leader. You just own it. Sorry about that. Got that wrong. Oops, that meeting didn't go well. What did we learn? Some leaders do after every meeting this thing, WWWEBI. What's that mean? What went well? WWW. So you talk about that. Even better if. That's what could we do to make it better next time. And if you're leading something, that's a great way of gathering feedback.
Hello, my name is Asel. I'm from Turkey. So my question is, you had a very squiggly career. You had people work for you, you worked for people, you worked alongside people. From your observations and your personal experiences, what would you say distinguished people who excelled at their work from people who were good at their work?
So I think that the people that practice some of the things I've been talking about here were far better leaders and managers. And I learned so much more from them. And they were much more effective in getting the best out of the team. It's kind of like me when I was that mid-30s and I was allowed to work flexibly, so I let my team work flexibly. I still said, look, we got to deliver great results, but I allowed them to adapt and I played to their strengths and they were all humans like me and we got great results. So I really believe that the principles I've shared with you here are the principles that really distinguish really great leaders and managers from just good leaders and managers. And then the bad ones are the ones that don't do any of this. You know, they hide in their office or they ignore everybody or they never tell you what they think or they micromanage you or they're bullies. Those people are never good managers. And they rarely get good results.
How you doing? My name is Patrick Robinson. I'm from the College of New Jersey. And my question is back to what we were talking about before on times of uncertainty. So in a time of political uncertainty like this, what would you say to someone who is trying to break the wealth gap from like a lower income home or a middle income home, trying to break that wealth gap and get over the challenges? What mindset do we need to have to stay ahead of that?
So it's a very good question. So social mobility is really, really important. And I think that I would look for programs that allow you to play to your strengths and get practical experience. So for example, in the UK, what we do at CMI are a lot of apprenticeships. And what that is about is learning on the job. So you're learning to be a better leader and manager on the job, and you're getting paid. And I don't know if you have programs like that. I think there probably are programs where you can get work experience while you're studying. I would really encourage you to do that. We know that our apprenticeships, they're all management and leadership apprenticeships, give people access to opportunity whilst they learn. And 71% of those management apprentices come from families where neither parent went to university. But because they're earning while they're learning and they're doing practical things on the job, they're really getting the experience that's making them, it's making them easier to find opportunities and get promotions. So that's what I would look for.
Hi there. My name is Kelly Mole, and I'm a serial school starter, and I open fully inclusive schools in the United States. And my question is, would you share with us a small snippet of your favorite leader who was an introvert?
Well, I think there are many, many good leaders who absolutely are introverts. And I think that we often overlook the power of being an introvert. And for me, I had one of my favorite mentors at P&G, that was my boss, was considered not only an introvert, but an eccentric. But he was one of the best bosses I ever had. And all you had to do to get his wisdom was ask him questions and listen to the answers and get into a conversation. Because he was not going to be somebody who was striding around everywhere, coming up to everybody's desk, slapping him on the back. There were those leaders, and some of them were very good too. He was quieter, but he was very intelligent and very, very supportive. And if you showed him curiosity and asked him questions, he would give you extremely thoughtful answers. And I learned more, and he developed me more than almost any other boss. So he was an introvert and considered quite eccentric. He used to stay in the office until 10 at night playing opera. He used to bring a week's worth of sandwiches in Tupperware. People would say, I thought it was amazing. He was just an individual. He really ate his own dog food, although there was sandwiches in the Tupperware, not dog food. But, and he was an introvert, so that would be my example.
I've got a question from Slido now. This question is from Anonymous. How do you know the difference between giving people leeway versus people taking advantage of your kindness?
Oh, yes. Okay. So, yes, be kind, but good managers, it's not always about being nice, okay? I think you don't have to shout. You don't have to bully. But you do need to be firm sometimes, and you do need to say no. And you do need to set clear objectives. Clarity of communication and clarity of objectives and clarity of expectation is absolutely essential. So that means that it's not about letting everybody do whatever the heck they want. If it's off mission, if it's off strategy, if it's not going to further the organization or your team goals or get that job done, you have to say that. You have to give people what is the freedom within the framework. You have to give them the framework and the clarity of objective, and if they are not meeting that objective, you have to sit them down and say, hey, Sarah, I'm sorry, but that video that you did doesn't really reflect our mission. Why do you think I'm saying that? Let's discuss, and let's discuss how we can make it better. Whatever it is, you have to give people that feedback. Please don't be afraid. That's not being unkind. That's called developing people. So please don't confuse good management and leadership with always being nice and letting people do whatever the hell they want. That's actually quite bad. And everybody will kind of take advantage of it, maybe not because they're trying to, but because they don't know what it is they're supposed to be doing. And you're not setting the framework.
Fabulous. We have another question right over here.
Hi, I'm Pacey. I'm from New York. I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on setting boundaries and how to make sure that boundaries in the workplace are clear, they're firm, and that people aren't taking advantage of you.
So I think that that is the same thing as my last answer. It's about clarity of communication. It's about saying, here's what I expect. There's an acronym for that, SMART. Have you heard of SMART objectives? Yeah, so specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. And the amount of times I look at performance reviews and, or people's objectives, right? Because you should all have objectives in a workplace. You should know what it is you're supposed to achieve. And it should follow that acronym. And I look at these objectives and it's like, huh? What? What's that mean? That's like, it's jargon, it's unclear, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. And if I were being asked to do that, I'd be like, no, I don't understand that. So I think that clarity of communication is important. Equally, it's about clarity of the way you work. So you might say, I learn best by watching, by visuals. So it would be really good if, when I'm learning something, if there's a presentation or something visual. Or I learn best by listening. So let's have a talk and a conversation. Or I learn best by reading. Or my quiet times are, my productive times are here. So I'm going to block out that time in my diary because that to me is the most productive time. So please don't interfere with that because that's my thinking time. And then, this is my time for meetings. So again, it's about being clear. You can be respectful. It's about being clear. And if it's about people taking advantage of you, I expect that means that they're expecting you, I don't know, to work until midnight or whatever it is, or they may be taking advantage of you and asking you to do the unthankful work. Women, more often than men, do that unthankful work that doesn't get them promoted. Just say no. That's the other thing you've got to learn to do. No, I'm not organizing the office/Christmas/party/carpool. Just say no, which is also a way of establishing your boundaries. And learning to say no is very important, whether you're managing or being managed.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for questions, but I believe that Ann is joining us at the reception, so in-person delegates can continue to ask questions then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann, for joining us today and for sharing with us your leadership experience and explaining us what it is to eat your own dog food. Thank you very much. Another big round of applause to Ann.